Is Purcell. I'm the Career Librarian here at Champaign Public Library. I accidentally became a librarian. I got really good at just doing resumes and cover letters and job interviews because I didn't know what I wanted to do for a very long time, and I still like to say I didn't grow up yet, which is I was still doing what I do, which is how I became a career librarian. And I've worked in children's museums, I've worked in group homes with youth getting their GED, I've worked detesting corn, name it, I've probably done it. And I love talking about conflict because conflict is a part of life. So I'm not going to do a whole lot of sharing unless you want to, but I do want to go around the room and tell me what conflict means to you. If you were to put a definition to it, what do you think of when you hear conflict?
One thing for the business side, you have the interests between the parties, that's the conflict. But for the family issues, the kids want ice cream, mom doesn't agree, that's conflict. It's the best interest from the people who think that's the conflict.
Yes, yeah, I like that.
And I just think like opposing, views, maybe on something.
Oh, yeah, just opposing viewpoints.
Or perceptions.
Yeah, I like that too.
A point where people involved don't feel their needs are met.
Okay, yeah. So we've got in business or family, could be work related, could be we just want ice cream and you don't want us to have ice cream. It could be opposing views, and it could be people's needs aren't being met. I think all of those are true. I don't like to necessarily put a definition. I'm sure if you could look one up in the dictionary, there is one. But I think all of those are conflict, but you can also have internal conflict. And I think the type of conflict that you have is going to look different, like you said, between whether you're at work or whether you're at home. This is part of I'm going to close the door real quick so we can not do this. But part of conflict, I think, is just knowing where you are having the conflict or who you are having the conflict with. But it's also how do you have conflict? And do you have conflict differently in one situation or another, or with one person or another? So that's what we're going to talk about today. As this is the Career Lunch and Learn, I do generally kind of gear these towards workplace stuff, but obviously conflict is everywhere and it doesn't have to be a scary thing, so I think it's appropriate to talk about it. So this is part of the kind of definition that I came up with conflict, but also where I got a lot of the information that's coming in this course. This is a very condensed version of the course from Achieving Success with Difficult People, which the library has access to on Gale courses. It is like a college level course with several different weeks worth of information and tests and forum work, which is very good. I definitely recommend the full version, but it also incorporates the Washington State Department's guidelines for communication styles as well. So that's kind of where I wanted to start, and which is why I have these different tests here, is what do these communication styles look like, and where might you fall into them? The different tests that I have different names for them, but I'm going to stick with the collaborating, competing, avoiding, accommodating, compromising words throughout this course, but you might see those referred to as other similarly named things, and that's fine. So if you want to take one of the tests, there is the conflict management styles quiz, or there's also, I think, the colors preferred method there as well. Both of them are good. Oh, I lost my slides. But either way, you're going to find out kind of what your primary style is. And I do want to stress when you take one of these to keep a specific conflict situation in mind. And it might even be helpful to take it a second time with a different conflict situation in mind, because that's the kind of thing that I want to focus on tonight. It's noon. Sorry. Of how you conflict resolve situations in different settings, because I'm going to approach an issue that I might have with my boss, in a very different situation than I would with my spouse, but also in a very different situation, like you said, with my 3-year-old who didn't want to put his shoes on this morning. Those are all going to be very different types of conflicts. So if you want to go ahead and take the quiz while we're doing this, that's fine. I'm not going to feel ignored. If you want to wait till later, that's fine too. Where do you think you fall? So I'm gonna, without having to take the quiz, well, let me ask this question first. How many people want to dive right in and take the quiz right now? Okay, I'm gonna set a 5-minute timer, and go ahead and take the quiz, and then I'll recap and let you know what the types of conflict styles are. One of the reasons I said, if you can, try and think of a specific situation or person, is because when I filled it out just generally myself, I ran into the same thing. My results were 9, 8, 4, 9, 9. So I was like, well,
4, 8, 8, 8, 7.
Yeah. So, which I think it speaks to you being a well-rounded person in general.
So is this other one different?
It's a little bit different. It just basically has you doing math, I think, a little bit differently. There's a little bit more math on the colors preferred version than the Atkins version. But they both kind of came to a similar one. When I did it again and I chose a specific person and situation, my results were definitely much more narrowed.
Okay. That would make sense.
So for instance, when I said, okay, I'm going to think about a situation with my boss, I definitely was a lot more accommodating as a personality type versus
well, I told you when we came
with my
in
spouse.
that I didn't rule by consensus. So it's no collaborating came in the lowest.
Yeah.
That was expected, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's good. That's self-awareness, right? Which is a big part of where you're starting with any kind of conflict, is knowing how you're going to respond to a situation. And I think a lot of people fall in those conflicts in 2 ways. Unless you are straight up in the avoidance category, you're usually thinking about that conflict before it happens. So you're planning out how you're going to address it, what you're going to say, how they might respond. Or if you're in that avoidance thing, you might just not even want to think about it. And then those are usually the folks who come in completely blind and then come out like, what just happened? Because there's not as much self-awareness, right? Because you're not pre-planning those things. And I think it's healthy to have a happy medium. There's definitely conflicts where I have agonized in my brain and tried to think of every possible outcome of that conflict before I had it, and that wasn't really great. It was keeping me up at night. It was stressing me out. But also, we don't want to not completely think about it, because eventually conflict is going to happen in some form or another. And so it's better to find somewhere in the middle, which is usually where coming through with this kind of worksheet to figure out kind of where you tend to fall is a good idea. So I will go ahead and read more details about the styles just before we go on. So the possible options, there's 5, is the collaborating style. Problems are solved in ways in which an optimum result is provided for all involved. Both sides get what they want and negative feelings are minimized. There's competing style, which is more authoritarian approach. So you're very goal-oriented, but it often creates hostility. People don't feel good about it. There's the avoiding style, where you're non-confrontational, you're not escalating the situation, you're postponing it, and it leads to unresolved issues, a lot of negative feelings. There's accommodating style, which means you're just kind of giving in to relationships. There's minimizing injury in that kind, because you're not getting your feelings hurt, and relationships are maintained, which is great. But it can breed resentment, right? So if you're not necessarily ever communicating your things and you're just defaulting to the other person's whims, then sometimes that can lead to some negative feelings still. And then there's the compromising style, the middle ground approach. And this is more useful in complex issues without simple solutions, so all parties have more power in that realm, but no one's ever satisfied. So you were kind of alluding to that earlier, where there's not necessarily a consensus ever reached. Everyone kind of feels like they gave a little something up. I had a friend who was a therapist once who used the term, he preferred a blessing of the differences rather than a compromise. And I was like, well, what's really the difference? And the goal for him on changing that term was, if you're blessing the difference, you can see that there is going to be a different viewpoint and you're thankful for it. And that's not always necessary either, right? You don't have to put yourself in that category about everything you disagree with somebody on, but it can be a better feeling than just compromise. Oh, I gave something up and you got your way. So that's just different ways to think about those different conflict styles.
Is there a way to move towards the ones where you're missing? Because I think they're all valid techniques.
Yes. And that's kind of part of the next thing. So in the course from Gale courses that I took this from, they then break it down for a whole chapter on like assigning you an animal based on your type, and then what that could mean and how to offset that. So for instance, for compete, they assigned the person who tends to compete a shark. So they assigned them kind of more assertive, but kind of also more uncooperative. So they really want to get their way, and they're concerned with their self, and not always the other folks. And then there's the accommodating style, which is more like a teddy bear. They're unassertive, but they are cooperative, but then that can lead to a lot of guilt or low self-esteem. And then there's the avoidance. They assigned that to a turtle, so you're just kind of tucking into your shell, you're just avoiding the issue completely, withdrawing from situations. They assigned collaborate like an owl, which is assertive and cooperate with goodwill and solving problem abilities. And then there's compromise, which acts like a fox. They're assertive and cooperative, and they can kind of give it some and also give some to take. So when in the full course, which I said, like, I do kind of recommend.
Can you say that's available at the library?
It's available at the library, so it's through Gale courses.
Okay.
If you have a library card, you have access to it. They are run like college courses, so they start like at the 15th of the month and then run to the 15th of the next month, and you get 3 like modules a week. And they are totally like learn online, do it yourself pace. And so this chapter really breaks down like how you can recognize which kind of type you are, and then ways to offset that depending on your situation, which I again think is the key, right? I'm not gonna have a compromising situation with my 3-year-old. He's got to put his shoes on. We cannot go outside. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to be a shark. Put your shoes on. But
somebody with ODD.
Yeah.
You don't get that option.
Right, and that's then another layer, right? So then you've got to find out, how do you get that solution where we can make some shoes happen that you do want to put on, so that we can get out the door, because you still have to put shoes on to get out the door. So it really does go into some more of those details. It also lines out when some of those techniques are applicable, because some of these tests you might see, if you just like look them up online, might lean more to, or you can tell that they're like, oh, the person who created this quiz really wants somebody to focus on collaborating, or some people really want you to focus on compromising. But I liked the Gale course here because it emphasizes that the different styles need different types, and different situations require different types. And so learning what your preferred type is will then lead you into discovering like how can you pick up some traits or techniques that can help you when you aren't your preferred style. So I do recommend that. But we'll go into kind of the next section here, which is where they're talking about that situational adaptability. So you're thinking about not only yourself and how you tend to react to situations depending on the situation or the person, right? But it's also a great idea to think about how they are. What's their personality type in an argument? Are they more open and supportive of what you're doing? Are they more passive and just kind of asking questions? Like, I definitely have been on that side. I tended to fall more into the collaborating, assertive space there for the majority of stuff I like to have. I know I sometimes then dread having to have conversations I know are the more avoidant person, because I want to find something that works for all of us, but I know right from the get-go they don't even want to talk about it, they don't even address it. And I'm also getting worked up because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, but we got to talk about it, right? So So all of those things are things to consider, right? Are they also assertive? Are they closed or controlling? Considering how that person is going to respond and how they generally react to situations is going to help you in that conflict style too. And you can never really predict it. Sometimes I've had arguments planned out in my head. It's going to be like this. I know them. This is how it's going to go. And then it'll throw me for a loop. So you just never know. But it's always a good idea to kind of like start from that. How might they respond to me? One of the things that the Gale course then goes into too is assigning what types of folks. Now this is what the Gale course uses over like adaptable or accommodating or collaborative. Is they assign them then, are they more thinker analytic? Then they might be more passive. Are they more feeler or relater to people? Then they might be more open or supportive. Are they more expressive? They always communicate their needs and their wants. Or are they more of a director or a censor about what their feelings are in a situation? And so figuring that kind of additional outlook out of how they respond to conflicts can assist. And kind of planning that program or that conflict resolution conversation. I really like this model here, which breaks it down because I feel like, as you have noticed, you're maybe a little all of those, and all of us are a little all of those, and that's okay. So this scale I think is helpful because it lines out not only where you are like in a scale, right, but that some of these overlap. The graphic shows that they overlap on purpose because sometimes you're in a compromising situation because you're avoiding. Sometimes you're in a compromising situation because you're accommodating. But sometimes you're compromising and collaborating or competing. So it's not necessarily one or the other. But then when you do get into these far corners, you can see kind of how this is going. So if they're avoiding the conflict, most likely all parties are losing, right? The person who is avoiding the conflict but needs to have it is losing out because they're not getting their needs met, like you were saying. But the person who they might be in conflict with is also losing out because they don't even know that there's an issue. Or maybe they want to help and they can't because they don't even know what's going on and that person is closed off from it. There's also, competing. If you go to the high end of that one, it's I win and you lose. So it's my way or the highway, like my 3-year-old, right? But at that same phase of his life, he's getting some independence. He's learning to put his shoes on. And I discovered that became the argument. It really wasn't about that he didn't want to put his shoes on. He wanted to put his shoes on himself. And so then when I was able to kind of get out of that competing mindset for myself, okay, not you're going to put your shoes on or else, but okay, why don't you want to put your shoes on? I could kind of bring down into more of this compromising and collaborating space because now I can understand that really this is just an argument about his ability to put his shoes on himself. And you know what? At that point I realized we could be here for a long time, me trying to force those shoes on him, and it's going to take him a long time to put those shoes on himself, but it's going to be quicker, and we're all going to be a little bit happier if I can just take a deep breath and realize it's going to take him a long time to put those shoes on himself, but
I'll put on one.
Yeah, but we'll be happier. We'll be happier if I let him do it.
Compromising, I lose some and you lose
Right, exactly. And so some of it is then kind of, that can get you more into that collaborating situation. If I put a shoe on, you put a shoe on. Or maybe, if we put our shoes on, I'm gonna let you have a book in the car. You're not just bored out the window or something like that. You're finding something so that you're getting what you want and they're getting something out of the deal too. And then, there's the accommodating, which is the completely like, I feel like these kind of
That's
lead
a yes,
into each
ma'am.
other a lot. Yes, where they're probably the person who's starting to avoid. They'd rather avoid the conflict, but somebody's making them have the conflict, and then that's coming into, I'll just give you what you want. I don't want to make an argument about it. Which I think we all probably know somebody like that in our lives, and that doesn't always usually end up good either, because then you can tell that they still feel like they weren't really getting to express what they need. There's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of guilt on your part, so it's not always ideal either. So I like this model of displaying the different types of conflict styles because it shows that they all kind of work together. They aren't all just one thing. You could even have all of these conflict styles in one argument, right? So it isn't like a one thing or the other. You're always on this side or you're always on that side. It's a fluid thing that can happen. And it doesn't have to be a stressful thing. If you know that you can predict how you might respond, and you can also try to figure out how they're going to respond, and remember that at the end of the day, you're there to just kind of discuss it and get somewhere. How are you guys feeling about these methods? Is this useful?
Yeah, so it's like building a toolbox.
Yeah.
You're showing us what the tools are.
Okay, good. Yeah, when I first discovered this Kilman model, that was when it really clicked for me, because I'd taken the quiz myself before, like I think in college at some point. I'm like, well, okay, but like getting to see a graphic of it, where it's like, oh, it could be all of these things, kind of clicked it in my brain. It was like, this is a whole process. The conflict itself is a process, and that's okay.
I think it would be also nice to see them ranked by effort.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different effort by each person.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, because although like my first thought was like, if you put, go up on either of scales, that kind of seems like it'd be more effort. But, if you're in that competing category, there actually, one person in that party doesn't have any effort. They're just saying my way or the highway, so.
And the same with the accommodating.
Yes.
It's just the other person.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be interesting to kind of see them ranked more. So, you kind of mentioned, okay, now I know my style, but what do I do with that style? And so this is kind of laying out a bit of a plan on like how to navigate through. Now I know my style, I think I know theirs, what do we do? So, a good way to start is identifying the styles that we talked about, and recognizing maybe your colleague is a thinker and you're an expressor. So finding some time. One of the things I've also learned with my spouse is he is definitely more of a thinker and I'm more of an expressor. So I like to bring a topic up and then give him time to process it. I would like to say that I came up with that idea on my own, and I didn't. It took me some time to learn that was a good way of bringing that up with him, because I definitely here's my issue, or here's your issue, let's solve it now. And he needs more time to process things. So he might not even be aware that there is an issue. So he needs to be made aware of it and then take some time to think about it. And then we can come back and address some solutions. So that's where identifying those styles can really come in handy. So then you're choosing a strategy, right? Like at that point we've chosen, okay, we know there's an issue. We've given some time to think about it and approach it. How are we gonna make it into a win-win? And sometimes you can't always make it into a win-win, but that's the goal. And so it's always a good reminder to kind of start when you're mentally preparing to then address that conflict. When the goal is to have a win-win. So especially when dealing with like a thinker, gather your case. So I've already got it in my mind. This is how I want something done, and this is what I would like to see happen. And if I can make some strategic points to him because he's maybe more of a thinker, that can be useful in getting to that collaborative side. But where I often get stuck is then I have to remember that other people have the ability to think and make their case too, and it is just as important to listen, right? That's where you get that collaborating thing. I feel like I personally almost always get stuck in that part. We're like, okay, well now you have to listen. You've said your piece, and now we gotta listen, because it's still gotta be a win-win. And it's not gonna be a win-win just because I laid my case and I made it well, right? So that's where those dialogues and those conversations happening. One of the big key points that I would stress when I worked with teenagers in a GED program is it's not just important to talk about what the issue is or how we want to address it and solve it, but it is very important to talk about time. And teenagers in particular, I think, are a little bit like toddlers in the fact that they think things are now. We are in a moment and it is a crisis now, so I have to address it now. And so it's hard to remember, like, okay, we know there's an issue now. Is it an emergency? And that can be a good starter question. It doesn't have to be the word emergency, but it could be, okay, here's the issue. Is the best place to talk about it right now in the shopping cart line at Walmart? Maybe we can, thanks for letting me know about this issue. Why don't we talk about it a little bit more when we get to the car, okay? So laying out the time and the place to talk about the conflict, even if we know about it in advance, it doesn't always have to be now.
From the other side, if you have a group of people and you're trying to set a date for an event and nobody's getting back to you,
yes,
then how do you get the fire under their butt to make them, because now you're wasting your time.
Right, making a decision. So, do we?
Can you preset a follow-up with them?
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on Monday if you don't
Yes.
let me know by Monday.
Exactly.
So that's the kind of tools I need to get my hands on.
Yes, and I think that's a big part of it is laying that expectation for when do we need to have the decision by.
Okay.
If we don't have the decision by this time, what are we doing moving forward? And I've definitely been on a committee recently where that was kind of a thing. We had a conversation about how we were going to spend money, and we couldn't agree with it. And then there was the desire to just, we just won't deal with it. But we have to deal with it.
You know
It's
what
the
city
budget.
of Champaign did at a neighborhood meeting?
Oh,
This is really cool.
Yeah.
They gave us all chips. And
yeah.
had us place, we each got 5 chips or whatever, and had them place them on what we wanted them to work on most or first.
Oh,
And
okay.
that was a sense of a little bit of anonymity.
Yes.
But it also made sure that everybody's voice was heard.
Yes.
And it was kind of like a ranked choice voting.
Yes. Yes.
And that was amazingly effective.
That's great. That's
so
awesome.
in that kind of situation, you can all agree that these are the things that we want to talk about.
Yes.
And then pass it off that way.
Yes.
That was so effective.
That is a really
in my
cool tip.
toolbox.
I'm glad you shared that because that's really cool.
And
Because
I
you
wouldn't
still,
have expected it from the city of Champaign.
it's almost like an in-person polling situation.
But
So
it was ranked because
yeah.
the first, second, third, fourth were already figured out. By the
Oh,
number of chits
there you
people
go.
weighed in, right?
yeah, yeah,
So everybody had the same number of chits, so everybody had the same amount of say.
yeah.
And it all was done while they were in the room, so it couldn't be dragged out.
Right. That's effective. And you have the visual cues too, which I think can be an important part. Yeah, that's
why I
awesome.
remembered it.
That's awesome. Yeah, there was a group I was a part of where we could never seem to get together on like when we were going to meet next. We didn't
That's-
have to meet monthly. We didn't have to meet
That's the
quarterly.
issue
We
we're having.
met whenever we wanted to. So then the issue is then we just would never meet because we would never come up with. We'd have our meeting and then we would discuss. Okay, well, we'll all look at our schedules and come back, and then we wouldn't really ever come back.
Always make sure you leave
Yeah.
that, so you put it on your calendar.
Yes,
it's
so
sitting
that's
there.
one of those similar tools we ended up having to do is be like, okay, well, let's just think about Mondays. Our Monday's good for people. Okay. Our Tuesday's good for people. Okay, now we know a day. Let's pick a time and then go from there. So I
And
have,
not everybody may be able to attend.
right.
And you need somebody who takes good notes.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's a big part of it. I would recommend in that situation, picking a date and then a follow-up, not just I'd like to hear back by X date, but if I don't hear back from X date, this is what we'll be doing going forward.
Okay.
Because now they know what will happen if a decision isn't made, which will prompt them one way or the other, right? They might say, well, okay, sounds good. Or they might say, no, I really don't want that to happen, so I better make sure I voice my opinion. So having that end date and then the consequences, which is where with the teenagers would really help. Okay, if you bring this argument up to me at 11 o'clock at night when I'm about to do a shift change, we're not going to have a good conversation about this. Why don't we talk about this tomorrow morning? But having that, okay, we
And
will
with
follow
kids,
up.
with teenagers, I'll bring the lattes.
Yes, yeah. And having that like sense of when it's going to happen next
Okay.
is I think the key part there, because then that unknown, either for the folks who don't care or the people who care a lot,
So
is
if we don't hear with you, then the highest number of votes is when we'll meet.
yeah,
Something
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This is really
Yeah.
useful.
Good. Yeah. So that's again that kind of active listening. We kind of naturally went through a lot of these just in working that out with a real life example, proposing solutions, right? So having an end game. This is what's going to happen, one way or the other, or here's some alternatives of other ways that could happen. And then these key points, which, like I said, are a lot of the things that I mostly make key points because those are key points for me, are being flexible with the situation. Because at the end of the day, or the end of the conflict, or the end of the conversation, the goal is for it to be a win-win. So focus on those solutions and remember empathy, because people's needs and wants aren't always the same. So the key takeaways from these is individual styles, remembering that everybody kind of communicates a little bit differently, and that's okay. Remembering, identifying the issue is the key part, right? The point isn't necessarily the conflict itself. So many folks, I think, on one side or the other get really bent out about the conflict. There is a conflict. We're going to have a conflict. But I think the important thing to remember is, yes, there is going to be a conflict. There's conflict every day, but knowing what the conflict's about and whether that conflict looks the same from my perspective or for somebody else's. Like my perspective is I need my kid to get the shoes on. His perspective is I want to do it myself. So those two different problems create a different argument from one side or the other. And then fostering those relationships, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to get through that conflict as easy as we can, regardless of what style that we prefer to address our conflict in. So, as I said, this is kind of the very condensed version of the course, Achieving Success with Difficult People, that we offer at Yale Courses. It's also been inspired by several folks that I've worked with through doing this as well. There are other people in the community who talk about this. So if you want to know more about them and their resources, I'm happy to pass on. Kevin Martledge, I've got his thing up here next to your advisors. He's talked about conflict navigation and has a very different take on it that I do, which I find fascinating. And then there is a nonprofit group in town called Dispute Resolution, which is grant funded, and they help people resolve conflicts for free. It's grant funded. So, and that can be landlord tenants. I think that's the majority of what they help with, but it could also be parent sibling, or sibling, coworker boss, coworkers. It doesn't really matter. The two people in conflict, they're happy to meet and trying to help solve the conflict. Because sometimes you get to that point where you are not going to be able to get that conflict worked out without a third party involved. And I think that's important to recognize too. So I really appreciate y'all for coming in and engaging with the conflict navigation and how to get through it and how to talk about it. The analyzing your situation part and the conversation, that is all of the PowerPoint presentation that I had. I always like to leave a little bit of time at the end, like I said, to ask questions, to follow up, if you had anything else to share.
Does the Gale course give examples like we've discussed
Mm-hmm.
and actual specific
They do.
situation tools?
They do, yeah. Some of these like notes that I have up here are like packets long because it's got the whole walkthrough of a particular situation or
Okay.
how to analyze what they might be. That part I felt like I kind of skipped that step for a little bit. But they've got, ways to show supportive feelings if that's where you need to
Okay.
get better at. They've got
Yes.
ways to show assertive behaviors if you need to learn to be more assertive. So, and some of those are like
Awesome.
I can offer my opinions. I can learn to shake hands. It's very basic stuff, but because it's more generic.
But for those of us on the spectrum, sometimes those correct or accepted methods,
Yes.
we don't have them on.
It doesn't come right in, yeah. So, and then they go through those task orientation is what they call for each of those conflict styles. So you can pick the one that you got least in and kind of see, okay, what would those skills look like for if I needed to increase my collaboration or something like that.
Do you guys have anything to say? I feel like I'm dominating the conversation and it's because I'm excited, not because I don't want to hear what you have to say.
It's fine. I'm actually enjoying it.
And the other question I had
Yeah.
is you said it ran the 15th through the 15th.
Usually, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so if like, for example, I know I'm booked in September, I'm out of town a lot, so do I need to schedule now for October 15th?
No, you don't have, there's a window before and after. I can actually do a little demo right here because it's on our website. Let's see if I can remember what my login is. You might be able to see it without me having a login because the courses stay the same.
Okay.
They're instructor led, but it's the same courses every month. It's just when you sign up and when they start that
And those
changes.
is there a fee associated with those?
If you have a library card, you can access it for free. So you'll start on our website at the e-library.
Okay.
And then there's multiple ways to get there, but I usually go to online tools.
Okay.
And then it's under education and test prep. And that'll take you right to the catalog. So you can see all of the classes that they offer without having to sign in. Once you sign in, that's where you would then choose to enroll. It pairs your library card with an email address.
Okay.
So you can set up to get reminders, like I often have to do. It's a new week, here's new courses that have opened for you now, because otherwise I tend to forget. But it is right here, I think. There's a great search feature, but it comes right up. And then the next start date is September 17th, so there's some time. But then after that, October 15th, November 12th, December 17th. So, but Gale Courses just has a whole bunch of awesome information on it too. Like I said, that is just the course I borrowed a lot of my information from on teaching this one. There's language use you can learn on here. There's grant writing courses on here. There's accounting basics. There's also like how to take guitar. There's a lot of fun stuff too. So it's a really awesome resource. Definitely recommend.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like the fact that it's gonna have specific examples. Sometimes I need
Yes.
to know
Yes.
what a ruler looks like, what a hammer looks like, and carry a big belt with me.
Just to have it all laid out. Yeah. Yeah. And it is a. I think it said it was they're all of them like 6-week courses, and so there's like kind of 3 little modules in each one. And this is literally very just condensed down into like a half-an-hour program from what was on there. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But also, if you just need an entry-level point, this is it. So.
No, thank you. This is.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it'll teach me patience.
Yeah.
But that seems to be what is a problem with the collaborating style. And then it even says it time-consuming and energy-consuming.
Yeah. So there's a lot of give and take, a lot of back and forth, a lot of, okay, I need to calm and listen. And not just, and that's the other important part too, right? Like not just listening so you can talk to the next point, like to listen to comprehend. I have to remind myself to do that one a lot too.